All right.
All right, we all ready to go?
Let's go. Yep.
All right, let me switch back around here. There we go. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back once again to our Conversations in Transportation series. We're kind of jokingly calling it Season 2. I was talking about that with Joe before we got started today. Since we haven't done this for a few months, kind of wanted to remind everybody of how things will work over the next hour or so and what to expect. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Hummer here in a minute to introduce our guest. And then about the next 40 minutes after that or so will be the actual conversation itself. Dr. Hummer's prepared a variety of questions, and it'll be a good conversation. That's what we hope for. In the meantime, if you run into any questions or things you'd like to learn more about, please enter those in the Q&A function down at the bottom. That's what we use to actually get our questions in line, because that's going to be the last 15 minutes or so, give or take, of the hour, is your questions, things that you want to know. And it's meant to be as interactive as possible. So if a topic comes up that you're very interested in, go ahead and pop a question down there, and then we'll make sure it gets answered at the end of the hour. As for what happens after the session, later on this afternoon, you will receive a link to the PDH form and the evaluation form. So please fill that out. We're always looking to improve these, get whatever feedback would make these better for you. This is, again, it feels like we've been doing these for a long time. We've really only been doing them a year. We only have one every couple of months. So again, any feedback is welcomed and appreciated. And again, if you didn't register via the link on the NICSite website, please email me. My email will be on the slide at the end of the hour, and I will send you a link to the PDH and evaluation forms for you to fill out. Once again, one more reminder, questions go in the Q&A function. That's the best way to get your questions to us. If you put them in the chat, we'll probably see them, but the best place to make sure we see them is in the Q&A. And on that note, I'll turn it over to Dr. Hummer.
Thanks, Andy, and welcome everybody. I'm glad you could join us today for, episode 1, season 2 of Conversation in Transportation. We really enjoy bringing these to you. We hope that you're getting value out of these conversations, and that we are coming up with interesting topics and interesting guests. And I think we've got one today for sure. Thanks to our sponsors, the NICSite Diamond and Gold sponsors. In particular, you saw some logos on the screen as you came in, and we really appreciate their support. They make this possible, and really everything we do at NICSite. So thanks for that. Today, we're talking about management of transportation company in particular. And our guest is Brandon Nevers. Brandon is the CEO of Kittleson and Associates, which is a fairly large nationwide transportation consulting firm, headquarters in Portland, Oregon. Kittleson has a good presence in North Carolina. Brandon became a transportation engineer more than 20 years ago with a desire to solve problems and work with people to achieve common goals. He's led multimodal transportation planning, operations, and design projects and studies in several regions across the country. with focus on making most of the transportation investments. Brandon also has a strong interest in research and served as a principal investigator for NCHRP, Federal Highway, and the SHARP 2 research programs on topics such as automated signal performance, travel time data analytics, reliability, and traffic modeling and simulation. Since January of 2020, Brandon served as the firm's president and chief executive officer. So also note that Brandon has a master's in civil engineering from NC State, where I got to know him and have followed his progress ever since. Brandon, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Hummer. It's great to be able to talk with you. Thanks, Andy, too, for the setting this up. And yeah, glad to participate. Appreciate all the attendees being here.
Yeah, good. Let's start out. Tell us a little bit more about your company, for those who are unfamiliar with it. So what type of work does Kittleson really specialize in?
Yep, Kittleson's a transportation engineering and planning firm. We were founded in 1985 by Wayne Kittleson. So he began as a sole owner, started by himself. Pretty simple premise. He wanted to work with people who shared similar passions. He came from transportation background, had been in a larger multidisciplinary civil firm, but really wanted to be in an environment where transportation was the focus, and wanted to work with people and in a culture where really the focus was on one another. So focus on teamwork, collaboration, and learning. Really, as the firm has evolved from 1985 to now, a lot of the evolution has followed just what we've seen in the transportation industry, particularly out of the transportation engineering and planning field. So early on, and I joined in 1996, so a little over 10 years in, I worked on traffic studies. I worked on corridor plans, traffic design, but really over the last 20 plus years, it's evolved to safety, multimodal, land use, transportation planning, transit. So we cover those bases. About 3/4 or so of our work is on the public sector, so state departments of transportation, cities, counties, and so forth. We also do private development work for institutions, universities, hospitals as well, get involved in parking, those kinds of things. Get into now final roadway design as well, but focus is still all within transportation.
Okay. Would it be wrong? I guess my association with Kittleson would be that they really try to be sort of on the cutting edge or really applied research. That not so much sort of the grunt work, but you guys try to be on the edge.
Yeah, it comes directly from our founder and what he brought. I think it starts from also just the individuals and the characteristics he was looking for, and then over time as a firm we've looked to add, which are people passionate, looking to drive and push the envelope a little bit. That's led us into research and work through NCHRP, TRB program, Federal Highway. But I think the value we add as a researcher is that day in and day out, we are working with local clients. And so I think our interest is how can we come up with better tools, better processes, better methods on the research side, partner with all the wonderful universities and professors studying these ideas, put it together in a form that practitioners can apply, and then turn around and apply it for our local clients. So we like that kind of that applied research side, and I think it's been a good niche for us.
Good. How many offices and how many staff members?
It's over 24 now, offices across the country. Started in Portland. We're in Florida, so that was kind of our second big expansion. And after I joined in the mid 90s, and now fill out largely along the coasts of both countries. Not a lot of presence in the interior. We have almost 300 people now, so it's about 40 or 50 when I joined. Mid 90s, probably about that was all in Portland. So grown a lot of expansion in other parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. Great. Company is privately owned?
It is. We are an S Corp. We're owned by our shareholders are all Kittleson employees. So it's about 10% roughly of our employees are shareholders.
Yep. And you report to a board?
I do. Yeah. And when I joined, established an independent chairman of the board. So my counterpart, Carl Pacetti, serves as our board chair. So I report to the board in my role as president CEO. And yeah, we have a board that is also comprised of internal Kittleson staff and shareholders.
Okay. Yeah. But appreciate that. Another thing in my mind when I think of Kittleson is it kind of famous for the one office structure. Can you talk about that a little bit? How's that work?
So projects and project teams are the heart of our organization. That's what we do day in and day out. And really from the beginning, as our founder Wayne began expanding and thinking about how to grow, it did so with this one firm concept. And it began just from a tools communication standpoint. But fundamentally, our project managers are driving the day-to-day, taking a look at opportunities, what to pursue, and then as projects come in, staffing. And from a staff standpoint, it's one big resource pool.
Mhm.
And it's so early on, again, mid-90s, when there wasn't, the video technology wasn't at the level that it was here today, especially early 2000s. Web tools were just kind of getting going. It was a little bit of push to really start to see how this fits together. Now it's pretty seamless. So if a younger staff person, somebody coming out of school, joins and gets up to speed, probably the first few weeks, they may be working on 4 or 5 projects at a time. Yeah, it's likely going to be 3, 4 different project managers, probably within their office, beyond across the country. And I think the virtual world that we've experienced in the pandemic the past couple of years has just accelerated that. It's also been a pretty nice fit and complement to the system we had in place. There really wasn't a hiccup in making that transition.
Yeah, you guys were ahead of it as far as that goes, for sure. Does that make the org chart is kind of less of a pyramid and more of a web, maybe? Or
yeah, it's a day in and day out. It's project teams, project managers, management leadership. I'm not engaging in that world, unfortunately, as much. But we have a regional structure, particularly for just the internal processes, onboarding, staff development, hiring, all of those things. And so we have a structure of regional leadership, but we don't, people have an office, but now the office is less of a physical thing. And we have leads who people can go to, and then functional leads for different different activities. But day in and day out, it's the project managers who are driving things.
yeah, good. My recollection from a couple of firms when I worked for, one of us on the board, is research really doesn't make money. Research was a loss leader for both of those firms. So don't tell us how much you're making there, but it's just give us a hint of how you managed to keep a research presence there. It's tough.
Yeah, I point a lot of my responses point back to some of the visionary elements I think that Wayne brought, and recognizing that it was really an important part of Kittleson to have that kind of presence and not to just approach business from where can I make the most money. With that said, we can't lose our shirts in this, or else everything comes down. So we've got to figure out a way to keep it all going, to be profitable on research projects, albeit not at the level we would expect for perhaps for other clients. So what I've learned coming in and through my research experience is actually the fundamentals, and I think also the pitfalls of research aren't a whole lot different than a lot of our other project work. And I've seen some very difficult projects up close and personal, and can see the magnitude's different because they tend to be larger, more people, but fundamentally project management, communication, And where you see research projects go south, I oftentimes see it's that it wasn't like a technical mistake. I mean, yeah, there's challenges, data collection, things can go awry, things don't go as planned. But the one thing I also know is things aren't going to go to plan in research. So when you're in that budget scheduling phase, there are things that I think can't anticipate. So we've just simply tried to emphasize good project management practices, and really we found it isn't a whole lot different than the practices and principles that we should be applying to everything else we do.
Yep. Good. As a former researcher, I could say, our focus sometimes was not really on the bottom line. It was, getting papers out and getting the science out there and kind of whatever it cost, So we for myself, I maybe was a little lazy on the management side there.
It's hard. I mean, I think coming out of school, I talk to students about this a lot. When you're in school, you're working on the group project, you're getting ready for the exam. Yeah, you put in the time you need. Some people may prepare in advance, some people may stay up all night. Well, the difference in consulting is, that time's got to go somewhere. And yeah, you can spend all the time you want, although that gets into the personal life, but it also means if you're working on something that doesn't have the budget, you're not working on something else. And so that's that time management piece that is unique, but a lot of times just kind of discipline can help. And I think still deliver quality work. That's still important. You don't want to cut corners. But yeah, it's challenging, but I think the upfront pieces can help still get to good outcomes.
Yeah. How's business been over the last couple of years with COVID?
Steady, which is positive. And I think 2 years ago, it was a difficult moment. We didn't know what was going to happen from a business standpoint, started to hear about potential lockdowns. Initially, my thoughts stepping into CEO were just the very fundamental rudimentary. Are people going to continue to pay invoices? Is the mail going to keep coming in? You didn't know when you hear a DOT shutting down. Okay, what does that mean? Well, it did. And then I think there's a question, well, is that next RFP going to come out? Is the project interview going to continue? And yeah, little delays, hiccups here and there, whole lot of pivots that needed to happen. But the work kept flowing. And it seemed like, fortunately, in our line of work, aside from the difficult, even traumatic experience that was happening outside the walls of the office within the business, it was flowing. So every week I'd take a look at what was happening, look at the levels, and it was just steady as could be, which was fascinating. And then I think we kind of realized, all right, I think we're going to be okay. Or there are all the prognostications about falling off a cliff and what the second half of 2020 would look like. And none of that really came to fruition. Fortunately, in our line of work, we didn't have a lot of things that were directly impacted. I know some other firms did that made things more challenging, but fortunately for the kind of work we were doing, people just moved home and kept at it.
And it helps to be diverse through a crisis, doesn't it? Different types of work and working in different states. North Carolina was probably one of the hardest hit of all the states because of our budget situation.
And we did feel a little sting there, and in Florida went through a little bout. I think fortunately it didn't all hit at once. There was always a point in time where something was pulling back a little bit, but back to that one office approach and just how we staffed, it wasn't difficult for people to get to the work internally. We had to shuffle some things around a little bit, but by and large we could keep everything moving.
Yeah, good, thanks. Let's talk a little bit about your preparation on your way up or your early days as CEO. So I knew you as a master's student in civil engineering at NC State, but I don't remember that you took management or business classes while you were there.
I did, and honestly, it wasn't a thought in my mind in terms of the corporate level leadership. I wasn't thinking about that in 99, 2000. I think when I was sitting in the highway safety class, I was learning about, safety performance functions or predictive safety. It was, all new stuff to me at the time. No, I was focused on being a transportation professional, particularly through that early stage of my career.
Yep. And your bachelor's degree was where?
My University of Idaho. So I have an undergraduate degree in civil engineering from Idaho, and no, didn't even really have a project management class. I think they were just starting to offer it. It was kind of a new thing. But most of now, I think I learned a lot of lessons through both programs that helped prepare, but not in ways I could see or had even plotted out.
And then have you had short courses or workshops in business or management?
There's been a few activities over time. One was an ACEC leadership course I took when I was in Baltimore. And yeah, so it's much more leadership development, but within that, there were weekly sessions. They bring in different leaders from other firms talking about different aspects of the business. So that was very helpful. A colleague of mine also had gone through a master's program, and I kind of gleaned a lot from that. And then just, I think now there's so much information that's out there as topics have come up, just kind of doing deep dives and learning and taking advantage and talking to other colleagues in the space.
Good, good. Talk a little bit about the difference. I mean, you managed an office for a good number of years. Talk about the difference managing an office versus managing the whole company.
And there are some similarities. I think just the communication and engagement and it is always important, but there are differences. I think the most stark differences I think about it is at an office level, or even a project level, you have your hands in everything, you know what's going on. And at the size we are now, you don't really want that out of the CEO. And frankly, people don't want the CEO having their hands in everything. At least I think that's my
scary, actually.
It's like, yeah, why don't you you do your thing, let me do mine. So you really have to learn to lead and influence in different ways. A lot of it to me is focused on leadership development. It's important for people to be aligned. I think in any organization, I think hopefully folks would agree, they may like or not like what decision a CEO makes, but I think everybody would say, I at least want to know what they're thinking. I want to know what's important to them. I'd like to know why they're making decisions, even though I may not always understand it. So it just the emphasis on trying to communicate that, and it's different. It sounds simple, but it's a different dynamic.
Yeah, but when Brandon shows up now, that may not be good news.
Well, that's the other thing I learned too. So I try to make sure that is the topic. But yeah, people don't want to get a random phone call from a CEO. I've learned. Yeah.
Did you have a mentor or a advisor sort of during your transition?
Yeah, and several throughout time, but I worked particularly closely with Mark Vandehei, who was my predecessor. So he was our second who transitioned from Wayne. I joke about Mark having impeccable timing, having formally stepped down in December of 2019. But to his credit, and I mentioned this before, he stepped into his CEO role in the Great Recession. So he didn't exactly have it easy on the front end either. But he's fantastic. I worked with him a lot just since I joined the company. He's also very active in research, having led one of the highway capacity manual updates. But I did go out to Portland for a year. Great experience, family, and I just spent a year living outside of Portland and got to work side by side. And I really separated from projects at that point, which freed up the time. And in a world, I think every organization, there's a lot going on. Things are moving quickly. You don't always have as much time as you'd like to dive in. It did that 1 year really afforded us to sort of say, okay, let's before we just run on to the next thing, let's get into this a bit, understand the history, philosophy, and that was an important part of my foundation in the transition.
That was good that they were able to do that for you too. Yeah.
Again, my background career is technical project management, so there's just there's a whole lot to learn and get exposed to before jumping into it.
So when did you start to sort of get the management bug, or when did you start to think, yeah, I could do that?
It was all gradual, I would say, and kind of focused on things that were happening at the time. I think from the beginning, was attracted to Kittleson, and that I felt it was a place I could do more than just project work. I love transportation. That was the core focus. It's what I wanted to do, but I was always intrigued with kind of the broader business aspects of it. So over time, as things would come up, needs would come up, I'd get interest. I'd kind of take a peek and dive in a little bit, and that helped build it. It was, I mean, really probably not until, I don't know, 2015, 2016, 2017, where it became more of a serious thought. And especially as Mark started, Vanderheist started thinking about his transition and spoke to a few of us. And that's kind of, then it pretty quickly kind of got real as like, is this something I want to do? And that was the question back. So it took a lot of reflection, but it was more recent and gradual. It wasn't like a long, slow buildup. It was really in those last few years.
Or the lightning bolt on the road to Damascus or something. Yeah.
Yeah, there, I mean, early on, or not early on, probably 8 or 10 years, somebody had asked if I'd ever thought about that. And I really hadn't, so that was kind of good. But yeah, there wasn't much until more recently.
So besides COVID, any other really big surprises to you in the last couple of years since you've been CEO?
It's hard to sort of separate pandemic, but it is my normal of being CEO since January 2020. I don't really know anything else in that role. I mean, it is related to COVID, but it's just the nature in which new topics can kind of come at you unexpectedly. And then the need to just, get up to speed one way or another very quickly. Now, the advantage I think I have in this role that's different than, say, when I started and it was working, had a plate full of technical work, is there is time and space to spend more time in depth on certain topics. But it does feel like a race sometimes, especially when things are evolving in the world or it's new. And at the same time, then you've got to get to a point where it's important to bring others along too. So, trying to find that right balance, stay a step or two ahead, but keep everyone together is a challenge. So I just didn't really fully understand that dynamic until getting into this role.
Right. Good. Did you get to travel the world for Kittleson?
Well, I expected to, and I haven't so much, which has actually been a nice surprise. We were talking earlier, I have young kids at home. And Eliza, who I met at North Carolina State, she works as well. So we've got a lot going on during the week. So it's been nice, frankly, to have more time at home than I expected the past couple of years. But yeah, with offices located around the country, it's important to get out, and I'm feeling that need now. I think hopefully as conditions improve, I do have plans to do more of that. But I think I've also learned, like a lot of people over the last couple of years, probably don't have to travel as much as I maybe thought. And there are certain meetings that could probably just as well be done over video. So I'm sure I'll be leaning on that. But I'm looking forward to getting out and about a bit.
Yep. So how does it feel to be the sort of voice and the public face of the company? To a certain extent, as a staff member, I can sort of mouth off and nobody cares, but as CEO, they do care. You're being scrutinized. How does that feel?
Yeah, uncomfortable, I guess, partly. I mean, it's my mindset, my interest growing up, science, math, it wasn't, I wasn't jumping up to give the presentation to class. I did early on, undergrad, grad, I do it because I knew I had to, it was important. But not my natural interest or strong suit. With all that said, I think, and Wayne impressed this upon me early on, is that the emphasis of our firm is the and associates part of Kittleson and Associates. So we've always really taken the approach that the firm is the people, that's who's working with clients, they should be the voice. But no doubt, especially within on an internal level, certain topics you need to hear from the CEO, and you got to be prepared to address that. So that, especially over the past couple of years, has been a big focus. And it's important to be able to do. I'm also, we've added a lot over time, and I think about some of our our outreach, really the external voices are not me. And I like it that way. The work is represented by the people doing the work. We have a great social media team and are getting input from all staff. So I really try not to get in the middle of all that. But certainly, yeah, there is kind of a pressure too when certain topics come up and people want to know, okay, what have you got to say? What's the message here?
Have you joined some boards or foundations, or you have sort of the official role in that regard too?
I don't right now. I over the past couple of years developed different just connections where I'll use more for kind of networking purposes. There's a roundtable group of other CEOs who I was fortunate to kind of stumble into after going to a conference and interacting with someone. And so it's a real helpful forum just to interact with other executive leaders. We meet, maybe every once a quarter, about every once a quarter, and just kind of talk about topics, what's going on. That's been helpful for me, and just having a network of other CEOs who I've known over time for that. But no, right, especially over the last couple of years, the focus has really been just on Kittleson.
Good. Did you bring or do you have a big current initiative or two of your own things when you took the job? You said here's the really main thing I'm bringing that I want to accomplish, kind of thing.
So when we started in 2020 in our initial board meeting, the topic that I began with was really, what is this going to look like when I step out? And that's what I was thinking about, still think about. And my intention is and it's following the path of my predecessor, Mark, where he spent 10 years. And I think it's a good amount of time. I think it's important to transition to the next group of leaders. Don't want to do it too quickly. It's just disruption. It's unnecessary if you have quick turnover, but hanging on too long has its problems as well. So that 10-year marks felt good. And so I began just thinking about what's 2030 look like and kind of backing up, knowing where we needed to get to. Well, pretty quickly we realized we want to be in a position where we have multiple strong CEO candidates to continue this thing going forward. And it quickly then ties to just that broad topic of leadership development. So, and then realizing that leadership development is much more than just having a CEO and a leadership team. It really is just kind of, I think, implicit. It's an implicit need throughout the organization. So that's been a broad theme, and we've done more in that area. We'll continue to do, just unlock everybody's potential. And that's just a mantra. Everybody, it isn't about the size or scale we're leading, but it's really unlocking the potential everyone has to lead.
Right down to the entry-level hiring decisions to try to see leadership potential from the very beginning.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And then as people come into the organization looking for opportunities and nurturing and encouraging those behaviors. Yeah.
Good. I'd say a question has come up in the Q&A. Thank you for that. We'll get to those in a few minutes, but anybody who has one to enter that into the Q&A box, about 12:45 or so, we'll turn to that and lob a few of those Brandon's way. So please do enter those in as they occur to you. So let me do some word association here. Throw out a word and get your quick reaction to that. And the top of the list, especially this time of year, is taxes.
Yeah, that tends to elicit a visceral reaction. I mean, honestly, for me, in a corporate leadership role, it's a business expense. It's something we plan for. It doesn't drive our strategy, nor do I think it should. It's kind of interesting when I think about it as a professional, transportation professional. We're pretty dependent upon it, right? Our public money comes through that. I think, so we have a new Infrastructure Jobs Act, incredibly exciting. We'll kind of figure out what's going to pay for it. But regardless, something I've thought about and thought about over time, I think it's important to recognize our role as professionals and being stewards of that dollar to build the trust and reputation within the work we do. And if we do that well, I think we'll be happy with future funding that comes.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that that's not the tail that wags the dog. That's sometimes the impression I get with companies, and glad to hear that's, maybe not for you guys. Okay, next, health insurance.
Health insurance, I think is, you were doing quick word associations, and with me, I don't know that anything's quick, but I think complicated and challenging. So, starting from the employee perspective, it is a bit of a labyrinth, and I never spent a lot of, it's one of those things I don't know that you really learn about it, or you need it when you need it, right? And otherwise, it's not something you spend a lot of time thinking about in a corporate role where it's important to provide strong coverage. Trying to just connect all the dots and make people aware of how things work and what, how the system is. It's challenging, increasing needs, people all across the country, different conditions, and everybody's unique. So it's a challenging topic for, I think, any business that's managing health insurance.
Yeah, if you figure it out, let us know, right?
Yeah, I know. And there's good people on all sides working on it. I enjoy our broker. I know our providers at the highest level are trying to do the same things. It's a tough system.
Yep. Next, billable hours.
Billable hours, it's our only source of revenue, like we said before. So at the same time, people want more than that. So I think as a business, we need to find the right balance. I think it's important as professionals. I mean, I think about my early years where the focus was billable work, but that's where I got the best experience. I think that's where we learn and grow. That's the opportunity to train and develop and do fun things. So it needs to be the focus, but at the same time, a lot of things to run the organization and just long-term growth and development need to occur outside of that. So how to balance, how to manage. It's a constant challenge and conversation for us.
Yep. Good. Diversity.
Incredibly important. So I mean, we've learned a lot the last couple of years. So many studies talk about how diverse teams are stronger. Diverse teams produce better outcomes. And I think we see it, experience it, getting people with different perspectives, different backgrounds. So we've got to continue to nurture and encourage that. I do think, I mean, we're in a different spot, I think, society-wise and in our organization, and thinking about what can we do to continue to encourage and further that. And it's not, I mean, we have from a diversity, equity, inclusion standpoint, we have a committee, we have action items. I think as we're approaching this, I think many others are too. The work is ongoing. It's not you do it and you're done. But I like the direction things are headed, where the profession is, and just I think where people are looking at going forward.
Keep working on it. Yeah. And then last one on my list here, new offices.
I guess what comes to mind is just how different it is now than before, and really the lower bar or level of work or cost needed to open one. I mean, I moved to Baltimore 2002. We just opened an office there, and it was just a big lift, and it required a lot. It felt like to get things going. Presence, and when I started, presence was really defined by office and size. I mean, in many cases it still is, but this whole world of internet, social media, and how people are communicating and making a presence and thought leadership, it's really just changing that dynamic of what an office means. So still important to us, still important to me. Fortunately, and from an IT standpoint and even a space standpoint, the co-sharing and other options, a lot more flexibility in how you get started, a lot lower cost or lower bar to get going. So that's great. I mean, we've kind of embraced that here at Kittleson. We've popped up in a lot of locations so long as we stay connected. And so doesn't require the investment, and upfront that cost that it did, 15, 20 years ago.
Interesting. Yeah. I do remember those days. It was a big deal when a company expanded into a new state. Yes, still is. There's still a movement of people and like I said, a presence, but the infrastructure not quite so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other factors are every bit as important, the relationships and, but at least the infrastructure kind of to get going, much easier nowadays, which, yeah, great thing for business leaders.
Yeah. Good. So let's talk about the the people business. You've kind of alluded to that several times here, and like all consulting firms, Kittleson is sort of in the people business, maybe more than transportation and more than engineering. Has it been challenging to retain good staff through the last couple of years with the Great Resignation, or hire good new staff when you wanted to do that? What are you seeing in those regards?
There's always a few spots, and I never like to see anybody go. By and large, our turnovers remain low and lower than what I've seen among peers. So, but so that's kind of a knock on wood moment. You don't know what's going to happen. I don't take anything for granted. But you said it, people business. In my role now, I a lot of times think of Kittleson as a hiring and staff development firm, because that's what we do. We're trying to attract people who have that common passion, common, buy into the common principles, values, and then who develop and grow, because it's through those individuals, that's who's driving the growth of the company. So it's incredibly important. I think we saw, early on, like a lot of companies, I think when people don't know what's happening in the future, there's a tendency to just hold. So that 2020, there wasn't a lot of movement in the workplace. In the industry, not a lot of people moving around, but everybody's feeling it now. A lot of pressures, wage pressures, there's kind of an unthawing, people rethinking what they want to do in life. And so, I no doubt have staff doing that as well. But to this point, fortunately, the retention is held.
Yeah, good. Is Kittleson hiring different kinds of people lately, let's say the last 10 years or so, than what you remember before?
Yeah, it's exciting. I think Wayne had always wanted to just continue to broaden, find different expertise that could help everyone grow. And so we've continued that tradition. I think, there's a balance and a timing of when is the right time. You never really know. Sometimes it's got to be sooner than maybe when you're ready. But it's ranging from, the kind of data science, software development side, landscape, urban design. We're getting into different visualization, and then especially on our partner support staff in everything from marketing to communications to people ops, HR. All those things we are, as we grow, just continuing to, and it's exciting just to bring in other expertise. It's a small firm, and as a leader in a small firm, you get to do a lot of things, which is good. But especially now, I appreciate being able to bring in experts who have this professional background, do those things for a living, and technically as well, bring in new technical areas of expertise. So,
and is it a challenge to keep some of those experts engaged, or that your transportation engineer? I would imagine that's really the core, the bones of the company, and that's, so you're hiring an expert that's not one of us. Tougher to keep them engaged and involved.
I think it does take something unique, because if you're coming into an organization doing something that nobody else does, it naturally creates no matter how much you try to foster and encourage and support. But there's people do look for that mentorship and training oftentimes in their field. So the hardest is early on. You kind of need that trailblazer entrepreneur, and ideally someone who also just recognizes and leverages a network to get what they need outside. But then over time, the goal is to be able to provide that growth and development internally. But it is, getting into new areas. People, I think, can feel like an island. Stormwater design, water. We're bringing in other experts who kind of look around, and there's not a whole lot of people to ask about expertise, so they've got to figure out ways externally to tap into that knowledge.
Yep. Good. Let's turn to a couple of questions that have come in, and please, if you think of something, type it into the Q&A. We'll probably have time to get it addressed here. An anonymous attendee wanted to know What's your return to work strategy as we are hopefully emerging from COVID and making our way back to the office?
Yeah, it's really been the strategy from the very beginning, which is just to trust in staff and their independent judgment. That's been the emphasis and focus on communication. Think about what works for the individual, think about the needs of people around us, and go from there. And so I never officially closed an office, even though 95% of people were working from home most of the time. Haven't never made a return to office, date in stone, and don't plan to. Trying to, I do want to encourage people to get together, but have it driven by activity, not mandate, and realize we don't, like I think a lot of realizing it doesn't need to be a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 in the office anymore to do what we need to do. So just trying to embrace and embrace the positives of what flexibility can mean to the workforce.
Right. And your answer is bringing up something in my mind that is it tough to trust people? I mean, that's your answer. You're indicating a good bit of trust in your staff there to do the right thing.
I mean, it's building the trust. Building trust is hard work, and so it takes a lot of time. I think it's why, for me, drilled into me early on, and as an organization, hiring so important. And it's not just, trust isn't a one-way street, so it's got to go both ways. So it starts on a strong relationship. I think having a strong foundation of principles and values we're working from. And I think as an employee, if you see that in an organization, it builds trust. You've got to, and both sides need to kind of continue to live by it. I mean, as best we can. And so when that's there, then it's easy. But if you're trying to build it from scratch, or things have been done along the way that have breached it, I mean, yeah, to try to expect that just because the CEO is going to send an email that all of a sudden, no, it's a long, it takes a lot of work and discipline, I think, to build.
Yeah, excellent. One of our stalwarts, Reuben Moore, Lake Braddock, class of 77, asks whether you see any trends away from the American traditional land development patterns that encourage the proliferation of single occupant vehicle commuting. Growth, more or less, is growth or less growth occurring in dense residential urban developments?
So we work in broad context in I'd say in all of those. My takeaway, especially over the last few years, we're a country of diverse people who enjoy a lot of different contexts. So there's going to be things kind of going up, going down, but urban, suburban, rural, everything in between. You have communities that people want to be there. They have transportation needs. So I think as practitioners, Kittleson, we really tried to be that, not in the advocacy role, that technical expert, and help and work with the context, not try to force it in only work in one area, not another. So we embrace it, and we're doing work in downtown dense urban areas. We're doing freeway work in rural areas. So and I'm seeing demand everywhere. Safety, operations, design, it's demands across the board.
So, but that's a bit of a balance, isn't it? You're not advocating, but on the other hand, you're making hiring decisions, and maybe decisions on which clients you want to work with based on those interests. So it's a little bit of a balance there.
And there's conflict, no doubt. And there's staff who are interested in some things and not others. I think what we've tried to get to is just a mutual understanding, respect for, transportation is, I think, it's fundamentally pretty agnostic. It ought to be, in terms of trying to move safely around. So we work from principles and work from best practices. So I think from that standpoint, we want everybody to respect and understand those elements. But I think the fortunate thing is we've grown. People, we have the ability to focus in areas, but so.
Good. For my unit, David Olson asks what direction you foresee in the fields of traffic signal management and ITS.
This group is probably better equipped to answer that, because part of me, I've worked a little bit in the field. I was fortunate to work on a research project with Darcy Bullock and others on automated traffic signal performance measures. So I got a glimpse in, and it's incredibly exciting. You see all the possibilities. At the same time, I think there's an element of traffic signal management that hasn't changed in 50 plus years. Probably some timings in certain places that haven't changed since then either. So it's incredibly tough. You're dealing with upgrading infrastructure is hard, and I don't know what used to be 300 plus thousand signals in the US. I'm sure it's way more than that now. Managed by a whole lot of entities, it's hard. So I'm excited about what could happen and what some agencies are doing. We're doing some great work for VDOT, who's really pushing things here in Virginia. I know North Carolina has as well. But I don't know. You see advancement in pockets, nothing ubiquitous is sort of my expectation.
That's good. Good. Buddy Murr, hey buddy. Let us know if you were involved with the research Kittleson did with the flashing yellow arrow.
I was not. It's a colleague of mine. Okay, Ken Kaser. Yep. I worked with Ken, actually, not on that, but I was in Portland at the same time. So yeah, Ken's great. A colleague of mine who started about the same time was involved from research going back to Texas A&M that was done. To me, kind of what's fascinating. So now I drive through, I see these in use, but we have been talking about it and researching it since the late 90s. And you know this better than anybody, Dr. Hummer, about the time it takes for a new idea to take hold. And we're actually doing some research on flashing yellow arrow for states. And I kind of quipped, like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, we were doing research in the late 90s. We're still doing research on this, but hey, at least people are still, it's moving forward. But that is the speed at which transportation infrastructure moves. And I think we just got to embrace that. Change does happen. It just maybe not as quickly as we'd like.
Yeah. Right. If you'd asked me to make forecasts on something like that when it was happening, I would have missed it for sure. And a good question from anonymous attendee. Thank you. And it was on my list too of just tell us about your typical day, and do you have any personal tips on time management and stress management to help your role as CEO?
Yeah, so there's a couple different states. I mean, there are times when there's a topic that's boiling, and that's all I'm focused and concentrated on. Then that it's almost the other extreme of I'm just trying to stay connected and touch base on what's a lot of different things happening in a lot of different places. I'd say there's a portion of the day that is just, I call information consumption, reading. I mean, in this connected world, the issues, especially our workforce faces, aren't a whole lot different than other organizations. So there's so much you can keep track of around through other articles, blogs, talking to people, as well as just tracking what market's going on and kind of external world. So that's a portion of just staying up to date with what's happening in the world. But a lot of it is working with management teams, CFO, board chair. That's kind of the day in, day out work. So it's meetings. I mean, that's really it. Preparing for meetings, presentations, kind of messaging, the message, where we're going, strategy. And it's kind of like a project. I think oftentimes people realize in a project, you may figure out what's needed fairly early on, and then you spend the other 80% trying to figure out how to get there. And so that is really no different, I feel like, with my role. It's a lot of communication.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And anything on the stress management side?
So yeah, I think it can be incredibly hard to unwind your mind when things are really going, because I think that's what's unique to the role. I feel, not that others are putting pressure on me, but you just feel, these topics are important to so many people. There are so many different perspectives, and you're going to get it from all directions. That can weigh. But I got to find time and activities to do other things. Family, it certainly helps with that too. And exercise. I mean, it's the basics you hear others talk about. I started playing basketball again, actually, Dr. Hummer, which is great. I had a bit of a layoff. I think a few were a little nervous, but just those things, to get out, do different things.
I miss it. I retired a few years ago. I miss
yeah,
it.
I maybe should, but I think, yeah, I'm still at it. Taking care of, getting good sleep, eating well. I mean, those basics are really important. So nothing too earth shattering, just good fundamentals.
Good. Let me wrap up with a couple of sort of forward-looking questions here, and then we'll call it. So the federal funding for transportation looks pretty solid now for the out 4 or 5 years, assuming Congress doesn't get in the way. But what's your feeling on generally on state and local transportation funding? Sort of the big broad picture.
So, I mean, as it all relates, I think, in what I've heard and read is that a lot of the new funding that's coming is through grant type funds or new programs. Over 30 new transportation programs, I think is what I read recently. And so it is a little bit of feels like a treasure hunt to try to figure out how these programs work, how to get there. It's going to be competitive. And so we've got to push and learn about this and be talking to clients, but it isn't going to flow the exact same way it did before, even though the fundamental needs haven't changed. So I think that's what every consultant and agency is trying to figure out. And I mean, funding would kind of creep into the purview and policy of our profession before. Now it's just to understand that for at least the senior kind of project managers and management, it's going to be a prerequisite just to figure out how to get to that. So, but big increase in funding, which is good. As you said, I think over 5 years, that makes me feel good in my role to have that kind of set. So I think we got the opportunities in front of us. We've got to figure out how to find them and turn them into work.
Good. Is Kittleson preparing in any way for automated vehicles?
So, I mean, it's interesting. I think 2015 or so, it's just a lot of buzz in the industry and internally, just a hot topic, new things coming about. You saw some pilot projects, and then kind of, I think it's been kind of the same. It feels like status quo. I know a lot is happening within the industry. I still see people spending billions of dollars, but it's not with firms like Kittleson. They're developing data software, perception software. I think they're working on important parts of that puzzle. So it's still a topic, but the buzz to me in the industry and internally, it's around electric vehicles. That's now kind of where people are seeing at least more. Now we're trying to think, okay, now what's happening here? How do we help them? And seeing more, I think clients start to talk about that now. It seems like the automated vehicles has become more of a Tesla, a GM, and some tech startups working on pieces of it. I do think it's not going away. So we're trying to just say, let's not get complacent. But yeah, I know we're not seeing like a bunch of people wanting connected vehicle plans right now.
Yep. Okay. And then I think last word here as we wrap up. Are you really generally optimistic about the future of transportation engineering and Kittleson and other firms like it? Rest of your term as CEO and out beyond that, feeling pretty good about this?
I do, honestly. I mean, it's the answer I've got to give, but I will say it's genuine. I mean, when I finished my undergraduate degree in 1996, I mean, traffic engineering was a niche field. I mean, it was kind of looked at as this small little thing. You're just kind of working. I mean, it's grown so much. I think so much encompassed so much more. And I think for me, that's why I got into it. It just transportation connected to so many things. But I think now we're seeing the work and the role that transportation engineers, planners play is much greater. And the access to work and the types of things we're doing as a firm have increased so much. So I look at it, and to me, it's just exciting. More opportunities, more paths. And then I think you layer in just how things have evolved the last couple of years from an employee and work standpoint, the flexibility that I think is there. I mean, it's hard work in growing a career, and it takes a lot of effort, but I mean, there's just more pathways, more different ways to do it. And in the end, that's probably the best thing for diversity and including more people in this field, is there's a lot more ways to have a successful, satisfying career. So yeah, I feel good about it. I think it's always a place people will like to work. So I think transportation has a lot to offer.
Fantastic. That's a great place to end it then. Brandon, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. I certainly enjoyed it. I hope the participants did out there as well. And thanks to Andy Wagner for setting up as always. Thanks to the Strategic Initiative Council and Young Members Council, Adam and Ty, for sponsoring the conversation. We'll be back in April with another, hopefully a topic guest as good as this. That's going to be tough, but we'll try. Thanks again. Thanks to all of you for joining in, and until next time.
Okay, well, thanks, Dr. Hummer. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Brandon.